writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business, coming to you from Kobo's headquarters in Toronto.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Chrissy.
And in today's episode, Chrissy sits down with Adam Croft.
Yes, Adam Croft is a podcast pro himself. He has a podcast called Partners in Crime, and if you like reading or writing thrillers, that's a good one to check out. But he is a very successful independent author who has been publishing since 2011, but many years into the journey, he had a mindset shift where he suddenly realized he really had to treat his writing and publishing like a business. And he actually was running a small business before that.
Oh, wow.
So he had a lot of expertise. He just specifically was not applying it to the publishing side. And after he made that change, his career as a writer totally took off, to the point that 3 years ago, he switched to being a full-time writer, and now his wife works with him full-time as well. They had a small child, so his life has changed in a lot of interesting ways.
Family business.
Yeah, but we covered all kinds of topics like what that mindset shift looked like for him and what he's focusing on now, which is actually taking that knowledge and everything that he's built towards his success and trying to give back to the community. So he has a book called The Indie Author Mindset and a Facebook group, and he's really trying to share knowledge back to the community. So we talk about that and everything else he still wants to achieve from the author business side of things for himself as well. So I love talking to Adam. He, I think, is just a really interesting role model for, you know, if you've been in this business for many years and feel a little bit stuck or like you'd like to take things to the next level, it's a really interesting and inspirational conversation.
Jam-packed episode today.
Bam. I will let you introduce yourself, if you don't mind, to our listeners. Who are you and what do you write?
My name's Adam Croft. I write crime fiction and psychological thrillers, mainly.
Fantastic. And let's walk through your publishing journey to kind of locate us on where you are in your career to date. So when did you get started and what's happened since then?
I started publishing. My first book actually came out in the first few days of 2011. It was meant to be the first last end of 2010, but I had some technical issues, so getting off to a good start there. So yeah, that's what's nearly 8 years ago now. I'm now 24 books in. So yeah, I've been around for a while. I've seen most of the changes, and I think 8 years in this industry is considered quite a long time, which is bizarre, really, and just goes to show you how quickly things move. But yeah, I've done mostly stuff in the crime kind of area, police procedural series. I've got a traditional mystery series, my psychological thrillers as well, which sell very well. And yeah, moving into non-fiction now and helping other authors who are coming through now.
Amazing. So I'm going to dig into kind of a couple pieces of each of that. Hopefully over the course of this chat, I'll remember to touch on everything because I feel like you have a lot of expertise on lots of stuff. So let's start with the publishing side of things. So you were kind of hailed, I think, in a couple news stories as this overnight success, but clearly that's not true. And it really never is.
It was a long night. It took about 5 years.
Yeah. So kind of talk about that moment. What changed and how did you find rapid success at a certain point?
Well, it was all a little bit strange, really. I kind of changed my way of thinking about things about just over 3 years ago. I started doing a bit more kind of advertising, taking it seriously as a business. Because bizarrely, even though I was actually running a small business at the time and doing my writing, I'd never really considered that as an independent publisher, that was a business too. I've never actually treated it the same. I treated that more as a hobby, even though I had that business background. So I changed my way of thinking about things. I started taking it more seriously and as something that I needed to invest in and build up. And I'd always written in my 2 series. All of my books up to that point had been in my 2 series. And I had this book, which apparently was a psychological thriller. I didn't know that at the time because I didn't really know what they were. It was only afterwards it really got classified as that. And I hadn't quite finished it. I was struggling with the ending. I didn't really like where it was going. So I just put it in the drawer for a few months. And when I started doing some advertising on Facebook and places like that, I realized that actually what you need is to have something that draws the reader in, because they're not there necessarily looking for a book, or if they are, there are other books they're looking at, and they need something which is just going to kind of grab their attention straight away. And I realized that this book that I hadn't completed had a very compelling hook which would grab readers from the start. So I then made it my mission to finish that book and put that out. And the reason I haven't is because everybody keeps saying, you need to write in a series. That's where the money is. You need to build your series up. So this standalone psychological thriller wasn't my priority. I'm glad I got it out because, everything changed from that moment, really.
So you feel like it was kind of many factors coming together at once, the right book, the right focus on ads?
Yeah, I mean, it all started, as I say, just changing my way of thinking about things and realizing that I was running a small business at the same time. So that then led me on to things like Mark Dawson's Ads for Authors course. I was one of the earlier people to take that, I think, in its first or second incarnation. And that then led me to think what kind of books would be good to advertise, which then reminded me that I had this other one in my drawer. So it was kind of not so much different things coming together, but that sort of shift in mindset, which then had a knock-on effect through other things and led me towards that, as mindset tends to do.
Right, that makes sense. And then with that shift in mindset, did you feel like you looked back and felt like you had done things wrong? Like, do you think, for example, you hear authors saying they didn't incorporate early enough and they would have gotten a lot of tax rewards or, expense things differently at a logistical level?
Oh yeah, I wasted 5 years. I make no bones about it.
Yeah.
And I still do things wrong. I've written a couple of non-fiction books, or 1 3/4 at the moment, anyway. And as I'm writing it and I'm putting this advice forward, I'm realizing that I actually have broken and am still breaking most of those rules. And it's more of a case of do as I say, not as I do, because. And the more time I spend doing things like this, I'm actually neglecting my own books. And there's a lot of different rules that I set or advice that I give, which I don't do myself. So yeah, I'm always making mistakes. And I think that's how you get successful. I think you need to not just, have something go wrong and think, well, that's the end of it, but to learn from those mistakes and to use them as a learning experience for next time.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of shifting over to advertising, I feel like back in 2011, the early days of self-publishing in those first 5 years, the pond was so much, there were fewer fish in the pond, let's say. So you could find some traction and success without doing as much on the ad side. And I would say that's nearly impossible now. I haven't really heard any exceptions of authors who are finding huge indie success without at least some effort on the ad side. Would you say that's true? And what advice would you give to an independent author listening who's maybe on the earlier side of their career right now?
Well, yeah, it is true. And it is getting harder all the time. I think about 3 months after my first book came out, I had my second coming out. So I made the first one free, which is actually a pretty smart move, which was rare for me in the early days. And it got to store-wide #1 on Amazon in their free charts. And the number of downloads that was getting per day is roughly similar to what it gets per day now. It's up there for free still now. But whereas that was enough to get store-wide #1 then, it now sits around number 300, 400 in the charts with the same number of downloads. So that's how much more competitive it's got.
Wow.
Which I think is, it was tricky enough for me. It took me 5 years, even with that sort of fairly fertile ground. So it must be really, really difficult starting out now. But, I've learned a lot in that time. And, I think I've got enough experience, enough expertise to be able to know what works. And, more and more every day I realise actually it's the long-term things which work. It is actually some of the things I was doing in the early stages, like building up my mailing list, engaging with the fan base, rather than thinking about short-term things like, what's the easiest way to make a quick buck today? What's the new advertising platform? I'm not looking for kind of quick bucks, but for a long-term career, because I want to be doing this for the rest of my life and I want it to provide a secure future for my family. So yeah, more and more I'm realizing it's actually about kind of long-term, organic, natural things you should be doing rather than kind of chasing the next big thing.
Similarly, you said 24 books in 8 years, and most people who are not kind of in the indie author scene would say that's an incredible number of books,
Mm.
but we're seeing that rapid release strategy happening often on the Kindle Unlimited side of things, but across platforms as well. What do you think about that, and how do you position yourself in terms of how quickly you're putting books to market?
Well, I put them out as quickly as I can without letting quality suffer, because that's the main thing. And I think, I know some authors will hire people off of Fiverr or whatever and just pump books out quickly and have them all ghostwritten. I really don't think that's a great way of doing things. Again, it's looking for the long term rather than looking for a quick buck and thinking if I can get 10 books out this year, I'll make a killing. I don't think that's the best way of doing it. So, yeah, I try to write as fast as I can without letting my quality drop. I mean, I've only been doing it full time for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, the majority of the books were written while I was still working another job. And even in the last 3 years, I've moved house, I've had a child, I've, had various things going on, which have distracted me from writing. But you've got to put it first. You've got to realize if you want it to be what defines you, if you want to be an author and you want to be successful at it, you've got to put it first, as you would with any other job, any other profession, any other vocation. It's got to be what you focus on most.
Right, absolutely. And in terms of some numbers, can you give any stats on how many copies you've sold or any kind of numbers for listeners to get a sense of your success so far?
In terms of total book downloads, it's around 1.5 million at the moment. So that's across all vendors and all platforms. I think, having checked my Kobo dashboard recently, I think I've sold in 82 countries around the world in the English language alone through Kobo. So that's been fantastic and helped me find readers all over the world. And another reason why I love Kobo. So yeah, it's been great. And I think the vast majority of those sales have been in the last kind of 3 years. For me, all three of the last 3 years have been nicely into six figures. This year has been the biggest one for me yet as well, financially speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, the main thing is to keep moving forward and keep building that fan base and, securing my career for the long term.
Amazing. And when you think about goals for writing, do you have a word count goal per day? Do you have a total book count per year? Like, how do you shape that for yourself in terms of what you hope to achieve?
Well, I mean, I'm not always writing a book. So when I have a minimum of 2,000 words a day, and that's 7 days a week. So I tend to get a book out in around a month in terms of writing a draft. But before that, obviously, I've got the planning stage. And after that, I've got all the pre-launch stuff and the editing. And in between there, because I am solidly working on a book when I'm working on one, I take a bit of time off in between them. And it's not a case of waiting until I've got an idea for the new one, but waiting until it feels right. But I'm quite good in being disciplined as well. I know a lot of people would say, well, if I did that, I'd have 2 years off. And yeah, I'm tempted sometimes, but I think because it is my full-time job, I know that I've got to get those words done. I've got to get those books out. And of course, there's a lot of other stuff that goes with being a full-time author and with one who's had some success. There's a lot of other things that come with that, different obligations that take up the time. So there's not a typical day or even a typical week or month. It seems to kind of pass through cycles, which is something takes some getting used to.
Sure. But maybe it's interesting as well, right? Your routine shifts depending on what phase you're in.
Yeah, no 2 days are the same, definitely not.
And it's interesting that when you are writing, you said you write constantly. I've heard that from a couple other authors. Lindsay Broker, for example, said she writes better if she just never leaves the story, if she's always writing every single day versus, taking a weekend off for a day here or there. So do you find that helps you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The more time you take away from a book, the harder it gets. You got to go back and you got to read things. I forget characters' names. I've killed characters off, and then 3 chapters later they've appeared in the pub, and you think, well, that's because I had a week off and went on holiday or did some decorating or whatever. So I don't have breaks now while I'm actually writing a book. I try and schedule all that to go in between.
Yeah, or you could just make it a paranormal,
Yeah, I could. I don't think 8 or 9 books in I'd get away with that.
No. And in terms of the planning you mentioned, can you talk a bit about how that process looks for you, and particularly how you look at the market when you're looking at a new book? Do you shift how you might approach writing a book or a series?
No, not really. I mean, I've not started a new series in 8 years.
Wow.
I started both of my two series in my first year of writing. So, yeah, I have got ideas for new series, and the thought of starting them scares the hell out of me because I think I've got to start creating new worlds and work out how to market them and all the rest of it. So maybe I'm getting a bit comfortable, and maybe I do need a new series for my sake. But yeah, generally speaking, when I'm planning, I start with a small idea. It might be just a character or a situation, and I build out from there. And then I work out my beginning, my middle, and my end. Then I work it out into beats, which become my chapters, and I then lay them all out on a Scrivener file. So when I sit down in the morning, I know exactly what I'm writing that day because I've got my checklist of chapters, so I know exactly where I'm going. Otherwise, I would never get anything written. I'm not somebody who can sit down and say, right, chapter 1, blank page, let's go. It just doesn't work like that for me. So I need to plan very carefully and to know where I'm going, but I try not to let that provide any constraints for the story as well. If I need to change something, if I need to go off on a bit of a tangent, or if another idea comes in, then quite often I will amend my plans while I'm writing. So yeah, it's a case of having a strict plan, but being flexible within that as well.
I wanted to know about your support team, right? As much as authors are indie, you obviously work with other people to help get the books out there.
Yeah.
How did you find people like your cover designer and your editor? And are there any other people like a virtual assistant who make your writing life possible today?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is why I always call it independent publishing rather than self-publishing, because there is no self about it. I am a very small part of the machine, really. Yeah, my cover designer, I use Stuart Beige, who was recommended to me by Mark Dawson. He's very, very good. He's worked for Hodder and for, I think, HarperCollins and various other huge publishers over here in the UK, and he's very well respected, and he's a great designer. My editor actually was a reader of mine who had been an editor as well, and who offered her services. So that was handy because she knows the series, knows the characters, knows my style. My wife's always the first person to read my books as well. So she sorts out all the major issues, like the guy being killed off and then appearing in the pub. Yeah, I've got a couple of VAs who do bits and bobs for me as well, helping out with some social media stuff or some promotion things, getting me some speaking gigs and things like that. So yeah, mainly what I don't want to do, I want to keep building things, but I don't want to pull away from the writing. The reason I do this is because I love writing. I love creating stories and putting books out there. So I don't want to pull my focus away from that anymore. So yeah, the main idea is kind of getting this support network in place. And I'm a big believer in letting people do what they're good at. I know what I'm not good at, and I know what I am good at. So I like to do the things that I am good at, and let people who know better than me and who are more capable than me do the things that they're good at.
Yeah, I think that's a great motto. Play to your strengths and do the writing that makes you happy, right?
Yeah, you do not want to see me design a book cover.
I would say there's probably 0.005% of authors who can actually do great cover design. And for those who are in that rare minority, awesome. But for the rest, yeah, going with the pros is the way to go. And your covers are amazing, so you're making great choices there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I used to be a designer as well. I used to design websites and do different graphics for companies. So I've got that background. Book design is a whole different ballgame altogether. So if you're writing a book and thinking of putting one out there, and you're thinking, oh, my next door neighbour's son's a graphic designer, hey, I can get him to do the book covers. Just don't, trust me. It's far better. Book design is it's a completely different thing. It's like saying, oh, I need a new house built. My next door neighbour's son builds conservatories. I'll get him to do the house. I mean, it's a different thing. You just it needs a specialist book cover designer.
Absolutely. And it's even hard to put your finger on it when you're shopping. It's just something feels wrong. It's often the font, but as much, getting into the granularity of layers and all of the Photoshop, fine tuning. Yeah.
I mean, it's something that fascinates me. I mean, I actually interviewed Stuart Beige for my podcast, My Partners in Crime, which is very kindly sponsored by Kobo. We interviewed him a couple of weeks back, and I spoke to him about cover design from just so that readers, because a lot of the listeners to Partners in Crime are readers, they're crime fiction fans. So I just wanted to kind of get a bit of a background for them in terms of how covers are put together, because a lot of people say, oh, a lot of these covers look the same, or your action covers have all got, a man in silhouette walking away from the camera across a bridge, and what's going on here? Why do they look the same? And there are reasons behind that, and exactly what genre that book is when you pick up the cover.
Yeah.
So that was a fascinating chat with him. I learned quite a lot.
Cool. And it's a great podcast, and good full disclosure that we do support that, but because
Yes.
there's such logical crossover between your audience and our readers, it made perfect sense. And you're doing great stuff over there. Any thriller writers or readers listening should totally check out Partners in Crime. And I'm not just saying that because we picked it up on our side. I truly do enjoy it.
Thank you.
So I wanted to jump into a bit about distribution. So obviously you are publishing wide. You have books direct with Kobo Writing Life and across other platforms. Can you talk about that decision? There's obviously the wide versus exclusive thought process. And for authors who are exclusive or have some titles just with Amazon, I often get the question about advertising strategies supporting wide readership. So can you get a bit into that and what you have found works for you in terms of reaching wide readers?
Well, for me, it's all about looking at the long term. I don't think there's any business model in which putting all your eggs in one basket is a good idea, especially not when that basket has quite a few holes in it and the handle is prone to breaking. So personally, I think going wide is a way of ensuring that you've got readers coming and money coming in from lots of different distributors. I mean, there is a Kindle Unlimited gold rush, or there was anyway. There's no getting away from that. You can make some money in the short term there. But I think in the long term, you don't want to be beholden to any one retailer or distributor. And that's not just Amazon. It goes for Kobo or Apple or Nook or whoever. You don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket. And for me, it's about ensuring that every reader in the world can read my book if they want to from whatever source they choose. I don't think exclusivity is a good thing. I think the subscription model is a great idea, but it's the exclusivity which for me is a problem. And I've always said that if Amazon drops the exclusivity and allowed you to be in Kindle Unlimited at the same time as being on all the other platforms, then I'd be the first person to sign up. But I'm not going anywhere. I absolutely love Kobo. It's my reading platform of choice as well. I ditched my Kindle the second I got my first Kobo and saw how good it was. So I read all my books there as well. But there's no getting away from it. It is difficult to find readers, and it is, they are smaller markets, of course, but I think they are far more rewarding once you manage to make some inroads there. So things like Bookbub Ads, this is not the Bookbub featured deals, although they're great too, but the CPM paid ads are fantastic for reaching new readers. I'm just having a look at some of my ads that I've set up here, and some of them have got, one of them's got a 19% click-through rate, one's got 25, one's 15.
Wow.
You can get some really, really, some of these are 2-3 cents a click if you get the ad image right. So, and the promotions tab on Kobo as well, which I know has been mentioned a few times on the podcast there. That's fantastic, and my wife has that's one of her duties is going through that every week and trawling through for promotions that we can apply for, and they do brilliantly as well. I've got 2 box sets that are in one at the moment, a Kobo promo, and I think yesterday alone the 2 box sets sold about £140 worth, and they don't normally do anything near there. So those promotions can be really, really valuable. So it requires a different approach, but it can be really, really rewarding. And what I like is that you get to actually talk to the people who run the platforms and the people on the marketing teams there and set something up directly with them. And for me, that's what being an indie author is all about. It's about, everybody kind of knowing each other and being able to deal with each other rather than just going through a dashboard or getting through to a customer care team or getting robotic responses and banging head against a brick wall. It's good to, just to be able to actually speak to the people who run these things and have a professional working relationship with them. That to me is what running a small business is all about.
Yeah, it's part of what I love as well about my job is, obviously there's the reward of running a platform, and you can say we have X thousands of authors around the world, but getting into the one-on-one relationships. And I've been on the Kobo Writing Life side now for going on 6 years. So I have seen including you, authors' careers grow to the point where a lot of them who, when they started this as a part-time thing, are now full-time. That's what I absolutely love most
Yeah,
about
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you literally run the thing. Yeah, I can email you, and within an hour or two, I've got a response. And I can't just email Jeff Bezos and get a response. It's not going to happen. So that's what I love about it.
Yeah. And you mentioned Bookbub Ads. I think that's a really good one to call out, and one that I've mentioned that I've heard a lot of KW authors seeing success with. Can you mention a couple top tips for what's working for that for you right now?
Well, I mean, it's not an anti-Amazon thing, but Bub ads just don't work for Amazon for largely speaking, unless you are in KU, in which case get out. But it works very, very well for the other vendors. So yeah, I mean, general tips would be that Bookbub is great at, it tends to separate off in the reporting each different vendor and each different territory that you targeted. It doesn't do it for the authors. So I'd say each ad only target one author at a time and separate those off manually that way. It's also great in that you can see your results pretty much live. I mean, you can see when the email starts to go out, because for me it's kind of mid to late afternoon, and that's when you sort of log into the dashboard and you can see the numbers moving in front of your eyes. But it's a very easy platform to use. You don't need to have your graphic professionally designed. You can use their generator, but it is a lot better to use your own. I think David Cochran did a blog post recently on some of the things that work best with Bookbub ads. So there's words like free, new, and cheap work really well. But also I'd say don't think because it's Bookbub you've got to advertise a discounted or a free book. By Bookbub's own study that they put out in, I think, last month, October 2018, they said, in actual fact, I think nearly 75% of Bookbub readers go on to buy full price books. And full price, the average was I think $6.99 to $7.99. So in US dollars. So it's they're not only do they 3/4 of them buy full price books, but full price is full price. That it's much higher than most indies price. And I think on the other vendors as well, if you're looking to make inroads there, you can make the prices higher. I mean, you can't make them higher on those vendors than you do on the others. You've got to have the same pricing across the board. But vendors other than Amazon, their readers aren't so price sensitive. They are the readers who will stick with you, who will read through your series, who don't mind spending a bit more. It's not the same kind of race to the bottom that you see sometimes on Amazon. So you do get a different breed of reader, and you do need to make some slight adjustments to your strategy. But I started talking about Kobo again when I was meant to be talking about Bookbub. There we go.
That's okay. And looking at Bookbub ads specifically, I know there's geo options. You can choose from, I think, 5 locations now, and then narrow down by retailer. So do you do individual ads per retailer per country? What have you found works well for that?
No, I do individual ads per author target. Or per keyword, and Bookbub's reporting then. So I've got one here that I'm looking at, which I've targeted US crime author called Ty Hutchinson, and underneath there it says Barnes & Noble US. I've got the line there: Apple US, Kobo US, Apple UK, Kobo UK. Under there it shows me the different cost per click and the number of clicks and click-through rate and everything that I've got there for each of those vendors in those territories. So it's great that it splits it off like that. So and you'd be amazed the massive different variations between some of the vendors. I mean, this ad here that I was looking at, Kobo Canada has got a 19% click-through rate. Apple Australia has got a 5.9%. It's less than a third as successful. So you can look at that and that's still very high. So I'm not going to switch it off. But sometimes you end up switching off 1 or 2 of the vendors or 1 or 2 of the territories because readers around the world respond differently to ads, and you can see which territories and which vendors' readers respond best to your individual ads.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I've done some Bookbub ads myself on the Kobo side, right? Because we can use it as well, and it's super fascinating. And I really do like their ad dashboard. Having not done the featured deal side of things, I find it to be a really easy platform to use, which is not always the case with ads.
No, I mean, and the buying rate as well is a lot higher, I found, on Kobo. So I've did a an ad to one of my books, and there's a massive percentage of people will actually go on and buy the book or download the book compared to some of the other platforms. So it's a platform that converts readers into sales very well as well. And don't forget as well, when you're advertising on Bookbub, everybody who sees your advert is a reader. They've signed up to Bookbub's emails. That's what they're there for. They are a reader. They're looking for books to buy. That's why they've opened the email. So, a certain cost per click on Bookbub, which, on Facebook ads or anywhere else or AMS, you might think, well, actually, that's going to be too high. That's not going to be turning a profit. On Bookbub, you can actually go quite a bit higher because readers are far more likely to convert because they are there looking for books. So, whereas you might say, anything above 20 cents or 30 cents is not worth bothering with, on Bookbub, you can sometimes go up to sort of 60, 70, and you'll still be turning a profit because you'll be 2-3 times as many readers will be converting through to sales.
That's great. On the flip side, the other platform, obviously, that wide authors use is Facebook. How are Facebook ads doing for you these days?
Yeah, not bad. Up and down. It's this time of year, it's tricky. Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Christmas. Everyone's seeing the costs go up. So I'm dialing back a little bit on that and I'm focusing on other things. It's just a usual annual cycle that I go through. I tend to slow this time of year. February tends to be my best month. It slows down again a bit before the summer and then picks up. It just seems to go through these waves, and they're waves that you need to ride, really. And yeah, Facebook ads still work well. It's something that changes quite often. I think because Facebook, unlike Bookbub ads, unlike AMS or these other platforms we have, Facebook is the one which is opened to other industries as well. So we're not just competing against other authors for those.
Sure.
For those readers, we're against companies that make shoes and car retailers and vegan health food shops and all of these different industries and retailers who are going for the same people, because each person's Facebook feed can only have a certain number of adverts in it, and you're not just competing against authors for those eyes. So yeah, things are pushed up this time of year, and the more people kind of find out what works, other people start doing it, then all the ads start looking the same, and then something else has to come in to kind of stand out from the crowd. So, every kind of month or so, what works on Facebook keeps changing. So, it's something you need to keep on top of if it's going to be part of your strategy.
Okay, so I'm glad we touched on the ad side of things. And is there anything else other than those two ad platforms and obviously your own mailing list is one strategy you use to keep readers engaged in a much different way. Anything else you've been seeing? For example, I was at 20 Books last week and some authors were starting to talk about Pinterest ads. I know you already mentioned in the episode you're not really pursuing other ad opportunities, but is there anything else worth mentioning that you're seeing success with right now?
It is mainly the organic stuff, things like the mailing list, engaging with readers, things like podcast interviews and traditional PR type stuff always works quite well. That's worked for years and continues to do so. It's not kind of jumping on the hot new thing. I joined Instagram recently. That's been a bit of a revelation for me.
Welcome.
Thank you. I don't know how many books it sells, but it's good fun, and it's a social media platform which seems to breed positivity rather than a lot of the negativity you can get on Twitter and Facebook and other places. It seems to be a completely different breed of social media platforms. So I'm really enjoying that. That's good fun, building up a decent following there. But yeah, who knows? I think the thing about Instagram is people will like it because it's not kind of full of ads. It's not, you can't put links into stuff and things like you can on Facebook and funnel people off the platform. But, I'm reliably informed that a lot of readers do get a lot of their book recommendations from Instagram, from seeing posts on there. So, we'll see how that goes. I'm not using it as a heavy marketing tool, but as something to kind of network with readers and with other authors and kind of take the natural benefits that come from that rather than just kind of going on there with a hard sell.
So in terms of Instagram is a much more personal platform in a way, or at least that's how I find because it's obviously photos. I wanted to get into that side. So first of all, is Adam Croft your real name or a pen name?
It is my real name, yeah.
Your real name, okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't quick enough or intelligent enough to think up a fake one.
Do you ever regret that?
No. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, that's a great name for an author. That looks really good on a cover. How did you come up with that?" And I was like, "Well, might want to ask my mum that one."
That's great. I actually did not realize that, but that's really cool. In terms of opening up to fans about the other aspects of your real life other than your real name, how open are you in terms of, you have a young child now? Do you share info about your family? How much? Do you have any limits to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, this is a conversation I had with my wife actually about a week or so ago because my son loves reading books. He's got his little Peppa Pig books and things like that, and he
Mm.
loves. He's only really looking at the pictures. Let's face it, but he loves those, and lots of great pictures of him with books. And lots of people on my mailing list ask about him because I emailed them when he was born, and that got a huge amount of interaction and people replying. I think literally about 1,500 replies to that email in the first day after it went out. So people want to know about me, and every time I survey my readers every year and ask them, why are you on my mailing list? What do you get from it? What do you want? What can I give you more of? And they always say they want to find out more about me and my life and all of those things, which is very bizarre for me, but it's fair enough. And we had a chat about it a week or two ago, and I said, look, what do we do about this in terms of Instagram and things? Could we put a picture of him up there, reading a book, or because I've also got to think that I am, to a certain extent, in the public eye, and he doesn't get a say over whether those pictures go up there. And he, in years to come, he might not want that. But we had a discussion about it, and I have put one or two up there, pictures of him reading books. So yeah, it's a difficult thing. Got to balance it out and work out you want to do, whether you give your readers what they want or where you draw the line with privacy and things like that. I'm quite fortunate. I don't come from a background that has any writers or any people in the media or have a kind of public facing job in that sense. So when I'm with friends and family, it's my books aren't even mentioned. We just don't even really talk about what I do. It's almost like a different side to me. I get to split that off completely and continue being me. So yeah, any time there's any demands to kind of merge those two worlds, it always is not uncomfortable, but slightly odd, and makes me need to kind of think about the best way to approach that.
Also, in terms of the home work balance, what has being an indie author allowed for you to do? Do you find you get to spend more time with your family than before? Is your partner still working?
Well, I'd love to say it means I could spend a lot more time and it's given me all the freedom, but the reality is I'm sitting in this office for 16 hours a day most days. But yeah, my wife works full time with me. She does the kind of promotion side of things and some of the admin and the business side. So it employs both of us full time. I mean, we've got our young son at home with us as well. So the reality is there's only one of us working at a time. But it does mean that if we want to go somewhere and do something, we can. And we're all in the house all the time, and it is. I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot better than going out at 8 o'clock in the morning and coming back at 7 o'clock at night and him already being in bed. So I get to be there for every bedtime and when he wakes up and all of that. So it's lovely. I've not had to miss any of those important moments. So.
That's really nice. And what was the decision like when you started working with your wife? Was she doing a different job before? Was there any kind of conversation of like, is this going to be too much for us to be working together, or was that a natural choice?
I mean, she was teaching at the time, and teaching in the UK is a lot different from teaching in other countries. Teachers don't have kind of the same level of respect as they get in a lot of other countries. They are horrendously underpaid and overworked, and it's not a great job over here. It's one that I massively admire, but it's not great for the teachers. So she'd been wanting to get out of that for a little while, and when the books really started taking off, when Her Last Tomorrow really kicked in, we looked at things and said, well, look, it's too much now for one person to handle. She's got a job that she wasn't enjoying that much. She'd been doing little things during school holidays in the evenings, weekends anyway, just to kind of help out. So it wasn't a difficult decision to make, really. It was put a bit more pressure on me because, I'd been used to having a bit of a not a luxury with it, but knowing that her salary would kind of cover our fairly small outgoings, and that what I brought in for my writing would be extra. But now it had to provide everything. So, I felt a bit of pressure from that, but it's not all about money. And, we've, I think we've had a far better life since, and far less stressful, at least until our son came along. And as you know, young children provide stress of their own. Yeah, so I think things have changed, a lot in the last few years, but I can't complain about any of it.
That's great. Yeah, my husband and I have this goal, which we need to actually map out how we're going to do it logistically, but to retire sometime around age 50 and start some kind of small business together, just so we can work together. We always, I feel like some couples, you can do it or you can't. There are the people you say, I work with my partner, and their eyes go huge, like, why? I could never do that. But I just feel like this compulsion to make it happen at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of separated off the things that each of us do. We've got very kind of clearly defined roles. So even though we're working for the same cause and the same goal, we're not working together as such. It's odd. It's we've managed to balance it quite well, so we're not kind of walking all over each other's toes at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like you said, playing to each other's strengths and what you like to do. Okay, so I would like to close off by kind of getting a sense of what is left on the table right now for you in terms of big goals. For example, I didn't ask you yet about what formats you're available in, if you're doing translations, looking at movie rights, all those other things beyond the ebook side.
Yeah, well, that is something I'm pursuing. I signed recently with one of the biggest agencies in Europe, so they're looking at translation and film and TV rights, and things are moving very, very quickly on that front. Actually, nice. There's been a lot of interest very early on. So hopefully some more news on that soon. I can't remember the first half of your question now.
But quick question on that front: how did that come to be? Did you pursue them, or did they come to you?
A little bit of both. I was put in touch with them by a friend of mine, a fellow writer, a couple of years back, and I had a meeting with them, and some ideas were thrown about, and things just didn't really feel right at that time for me. So I held back and got in touch with them again earlier this year, and we started talking again, and they were still keen and been asking after me for the last couple of years, and had some great ideas as well. So the time was right, and they've been brilliant. They've been speaking to publishers and agents in lots of different countries for, they've gone through all of my books really, really quickly and have a great idea of all of them and how to place them and pitch them. And they've got interest from film and TV, and I've had inquiries already about, characters' ages and styles and different things. They're obviously looking at it in quite a bit of detail. So I'm happy with how things are going on that front.
That sounds awesome. That's really exciting and interesting that you are so strategic about the timing of that, but that makes sense.
Well, I think you've got to follow your gut sometimes. Sometimes things don't quite feel right, or the timing isn't quite there. And I think when I spoke to them, things were really just taking off with Her Last Tomorrow, and I was really having to get to grips with the publishing side of things and the book side of things before I started looking at things like translations and things like TV rights. So the timing is definitely right now.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing how that goes. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
But the first part of my question was, in the longer term horizon, what are some goals that you're working towards?
Well, I mean, in terms of goals and ambitions that I had when I started writing, I'm not going to lie, I've ticked off the vast majority of them. So I'm kind of carrying on that front and continuing to build, but I've not got many goals and things to tick off. So one of the things that means a lot to me at the moment is helping other authors, and and people who are perhaps coming into the industry now, or who aren't in the position that I'm in. I'm in a position where I can help them, and also in addressing some of the issues and things in the industry which aren't going to help authors in the long term, or aren't going to be great for people in future generations. So I think for me now, I'm in a position where I perhaps can do something on that front, or I've got a voice that people are perhaps more likely to listen to than it would have been a few years ago. So hopefully I can start to use my name and my position to to make things better for all authors now and in the future. So I'm kind of turning my hand a bit to that, but me being me, not dialing back on the fiction work at all. So keeping that going. So actually just doubling my workload.
No big deal. I really love that. It's truly one of my favorite things about the indie world in general, where there are so many people who, as soon as they start gaining traction or success, and along the way they're sharing how they're getting it and what success strategies, you see you, Mark Dawson, Joanna Penn, there are countless other examples of, so it's great to see you doing that. So in terms of listeners who want to know more about what the insights you've shared here, where can they get more info and help from you?
Well, my website for my fiction is adamcroft.net. My non-fiction is indieauthormindset.com. If you are an author, the Indie Author Mindset is available on Kobo. And I'm on Twitter at Adam Croft. My Instagram is Adam Croft Books, I think. I've got a Facebook author page as well. And there's the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group, which is a great way to kind of connect with other readers who are looking at doing things the right way and looking at the long term and building good writing careers for themselves.
Yeah, and can you just kind of briefly pitch your own book there, what readers could expect to find in it?
Well, for me, as I mentioned earlier, it's what changed my career was my way of thinking about things. And a lot of the time when I've had readers come to me with questions or with things they want help with, the issue isn't necessarily what they think it is, but it actually goes a bit deeper than that. And changing their way of thinking about things would have given them that platform to build on. So it kind of addresses those fundamental things and gets people to change their way of thinking about their writing and to see it as a business. And, it kind of addresses quite a lot of the myths and misconceptions in publishing, and just provides a new way of looking at things. And I think what a lot of people have described it as is a kick up the backside.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for all that you're doing now to offer that info back into the community. It's awesome.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
So we'll post all those links in the show notes on the Kobo Writing Life blog. And thanks again, Adam, for your time today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I
feel like I learned a lot, and I myself am really inspired to go read his Indie Author Mindset book. So we'll share those links on the blog, kobowritinglife.com. And as we're getting into the end of the year, we wanted to just take a minute and thank you all so much for staying with us, for subscribing even after we upped the amount of content we're sending your way to weekly this year for the first time. And I wanted to thank my co-host here, Stephanie. You came on almost exactly a year ago.
Almost there.
Yeah, so you've done awesome work. Obviously, anyone listening and enjoying the quality improvements to this podcast, you can thank Steph for all of that. And I couldn't do it without you.
No problem. It's been so much fun, and I've learned a lot in this past year.
Yeah.
But thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we provide insights and stories from leaders and experimenters in the world of self-publishing.
If you want even more information about growing your Kobo sales, check out our blog or find us on social.
And if you're just finding us and ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!